Thank you so much, and thank you to each of you as well for attending tonight, and for the opportunity, Sheetal. I really, really appreciate being here. To get into it, because there's quite a lot to go through, and I do appreciate if you do interact with me. The reason I actually chose this particular, there's a variety of things you can talk about in media, okay? From a journalism perspective, we talk about having fair and balanced reporting. Not everybody agrees that all journalists are fair and balanced or report well. We talk about doing a lot of research. We talk about how to package news stories, and that's just the basics of being a good journalist. We have ethics and a code and structure to how we present information. And when it comes to PR or public relations, PR people generally either have a media background or are involved in media or the movement of communication between organizations, and are especially focused on branding and building a brand. So the general assumption is that PR people, if you pay a PR agent, you should get some media coverage, and while you pay a lump sum to a specialist who has already got a bond with media, you're hoping to really get your information, your brand, your company's details in the newspaper, on television, across the board, online and things like that. But unfortunately, for those corporate companies that don't have the opportunity to hire a PR agent, or somebody who understands how to deal with a journalist, they generally have this assumption that if you phone up a journalist and say, hey, can you put me in the paper, it's going to happen. And when there's disappointment, because there's protocol and agenda and a whole lot of red tape involved in that process, there's not just disappointment from the person who's making the request, but sometimes it can really dampen the relationship between the journalist and the person requesting. So this evening what I'd like to do, and thank you so much for allowing me to use your computer. We're talking about, well, I've just basically given you a summary. I used to work for a journalist, Dr. Jeanette Vos. She's an Dutch-born American author. And her last book sold 10 million copies, and I helped ghostwrite one or two of her other titles. As you know, I'm the chair for SAFREA, it's the South African Freelance Association. So, and I'm in charge of KZN. So basically, I also help to train journalists in KZN. And so today we're going to learn about how to write a press release. What is public relations? Some PR tricks just to get you going. When you leave here, hopefully you'll have a few more skills and resources to present yourself, promote yourself, your brand, and things like that, especially in the media. And just look at exactly what is journalism, but specifically related to how can you approach a journalist once you understand it, and not to the academic degree that I've learned it, but just enough to know how to communicate clearly, and also in presenting your information, how to communicate clearly to a journalist in terms of emails, attachments, how to process that those attachments, and then obviously getting published and much more. So when we talk about public relations, and I'm by no means a public relations person in terms of, I don't ever incorporate that into my business, because in the industry, media industry, they say that if you're a journalist and you decide to do public relations, you're not batting for the other team. Because journalism has a set of ethics and guidelines and agenda, and this, like I said, a whole lot of red tape before we do a story, whereas PR is specifically about these few functions. It's about event planning, media relations, and when I say media relations, having a relationship with media personnel that you communicate with, that you have rapport with, that would be willing to accept your information and against heavy deadlines, actually consider what you're presenting to them. When they talk about internal communication and digital new media, we're talking about, especially with digital new media, very quickly, we're talking about technological platforms. The old day, we just referred to a newspaper or watch the news on TV or listen to it on the radio. But when you talk about digital new media, we're talking about online platforms, social media, and all of these various ways you can access information on your cell phones, your computers, or, as I'm sure you must understand, what digital really represents. Okay, internal communication is also how they interact between the client and themselves, and between, for you as a PR agent, if you've been hired to do something, or if you're hiring a PR agent, it's basically how they also work with the information presented, how they package that internally, and then put it out to media. Okay, reputation management. You get people that help build a brand from scratch, where they would take information about, let's say for instance, this is PSA, this is your logo and this is your brand, and the purpose of your business is to teach public speaking and present courses, and as a general overview. A PR agent would then say, well, how is it that could we actually approach the media, or allow this to be presented in the newspapers, the radio, etc. Immediately you want to find a newsworthy angle. Journalists and media always present what is newsworthy. We don't do fluff pieces. Unless you're paying a PR agent who has rapport and who can basically get published on the basis that they have friendships that they really lean on. And that's how they make their money. Because I mean, there's a lot of PR agents that try to befriend me for media coverage, and I'm very, very specific. I don't accept gifts because it's unethical. I don't accept, if something is newsworthy, I'll happily accept it. And if you had to come to me and say, President Zuma is coming to one of your events because he wants to learn how to be a better public speaker because he's tired of getting slammed in the media, immediately at least 4,000 journalists will be sitting there waiting with open arms. Okay.
We're running a course called Numbers for Beginners.
600 million, 20,000, no wait, 25. Okay, so also crisis communication would be brand management related, because sometimes you get like the Hawks will stuff up, or SARS stuffs up, or there's a big organization that's very well known and their reputation is now tarnished because of some kind of internal issue. Immediately you want to release a statement trying to say something to the effect of, and this is how you manage it. We apologize to the public. We have just been, this has just been brought to our attention. We are currently investigating, and we will revert back in due course. And then that buys you enough time to actually go and look at where did this, the issue occur, who was the rat who opened his mouth, and then you deal with it internally. But in the interim, when people are pressing you, and this is where journalism comes into it, if you are the organization that's being called out for corruption, the journalists will hound and hound and hound and hound. You know how we can be. And then doorstop you and stalk you until we get comment. But the quickest, most professional way is to make a statement, but also just limit your statement, because you also don't want to get caught for contradiction later. Oh, but in your initial statement you said you were investigating, so where's the investigative results, or what processes were involved, etc., etc. And then, does anybody need clarity on any points? No? Okay, cool. So the crux of PR basically, it's image maintenance, as we said. It's the spread of information between the individual or an organization to the media, to influence public and other entities holding a certain view of your brand. If I had to open up a paper or listen on the radio or watch TV things, TV programs, and keep hearing about how amazing PSA really is, and I'm like, wow, this is a fantastic, it becomes like a DiMartini brand where it's everywhere. Because it's so well branded and out there, and when we talk about media, we're not just specifically talking about how a journalist writes a story about you. Media encompasses, like I said, various digital platforms. So you get bloggers who are interested. Maybe they attended one of your events and decided, I'm going to write a blog about how to be a public speaker because I just attended this great seminar, and now for my blog topic I want to... So all of those various digital platforms will cater to spreading information about you, your brand, and your events, and what you do and what you don't do, or what you did that was negative or positive, and obviously follow suit. So essentially, it's about the public's view of you. And at the end of the day, when you hire a PR agent, or whether you do PR yourself, what you want to do is create an absolutely healthy image, a sustainable image, and an image that will allow you to continue to do business, not just for a very long time, but generate new business. And obviously help you make money, because I think at the end of the day, that's really the point, isn't it? Everybody wants to make money. And if somebody tarnishes your reputation, you don't want people questioning or second-guessing your products, or having you get referenced behind your back in a negative way. And that happens both for the brand of the company and for the individual. So PR can help with either brand management or individual brand management, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So, cool. And then obviously create exposure through marketing, networking, and relationship building, but most importantly, database building, which we will come to. But if you are ever going to be successful at doing your own PR, database building is what most PR people make their money off of. The reason you would hire a PR agent as opposed to doing it yourself is you're in a rush and you haven't followed all of the necessary protocols in approaching a media agent. Generally, we need X amount of time, we need high-resolution pictures, we need press releases, and all of the jargon that goes into the package you present us if you want us to use your information. More importantly, is it newsworthy? But if you were to hire a PR agent just on the last whim and say, oh, I've got this really important presentation or a really important event in 2 days, I've not contacted any media, excuse me, you've got access to those media people, can you please do it? Okay, fine, 5,000, 10,000, or whatever it is, and I'll do it. this is essentially what you're paying for, not just the communication. PR agents generally create a database. When you learn or meet new journalists or producers or people that blog and write about the things or the fields or industries that you are involved in, you start to keep a collection of names and surnames and phone numbers and emails and things like that. In journalism, we have a black book. Of course, over time it's evolved because everything's online in iCloud. I no longer have a physical black book, but I do have an iCloud backup. My previous iPhone got legs and walked out my bedroom in the middle of the night. And then about 2 weeks later, I got a new one, and everything was right back on my phone. Brand new phone, every single detail that I had, including SMSs, etc., right back on my iPhone. So my database, in terms of the people I deal with, from corporates, companies, media agents, etc., I can access online. How are you going to keep your database and keep it safe? Because if you share your database, really what you're doing is sharing your resources. And then if you're trying to do PR and get paid for PR, you're not going to be very effective because that's really your superpower, if I may say so. And if you're trying to do PR for yourself, you're now actually allowing your competitors to get the benefit of using your contacts and your resources. So just to move on. So when we talk about PR tools and methods, generally a company, a big corporate company, would employ somebody who could be the spokesperson, somebody with a media background that knows how to deal with media. In your organization, if you're large enough or if you're a corporate organization, you want that one person who generally media agents like myself would put into my black book, and when I hear about PSA, I'm going to be like, oh, you know what, my editor wants a comment, I'm going to go to the spokesperson for PSA, which in this case would be you, and I'll be like, oh, I heard that Zuma's coming to your event because he wants some personal training, is it true? And then you will say, I can't comment at the moment, nothing's confirmed. If it's not confirmed and you don't want anything out of the media, then you say, I'm sorry, I can't comment, or no comment at the moment. But if it is, then jump on that bandwagon and say yes. And then the journals will ask you, do you have a press release? Do you have all of those things, those packages? Assist with content control. Remember, content control is really essential because when you take information, holistic information, 2 or 3 chapters out of a book and just dump it on a journalist's desk, it goes straight into the bin. I personally don't throw people's things away. I'm not a hoarder for the psychologist sitting at the table. I just accord people the courtesy of saying, a phone call saying, I'm sorry, please can you compress it and give me the most important points, because I obviously have like 5 or 10 or 15 other deadlines in the same day. When you do content control, you want to look at the who, what, when, where, and how. Those are the basic 5 principles of journalism. It's your 5 W's and your H, and if you can compress all of that into one page, which would be your press release, you are most likely going to get media coverage, provided it's newsworthy. Okay, so you need to actually summarize what is it. Yes?
May I just ask a question there? The who, what, where, when, how, and you said you will most likely get press coverage as long as it's newsworthy.
Yes.
I am hearing more and more and more, if you're not black, you're not going to get the coverage. We want stories about black people. So much so that even with PSA, I had, have you got a black speaker? If you've got a black speaker, we'll take a photograph of them, we'll do your story.
Yes.
What is your, so it's disheartening for a white woman.
Okay, if I just go and hide behind this banner and shame for the rest of the president. No, I'm just kidding. You're absolutely correct, because every news media organization has an agenda, okay? And they need to full quota. They need to obviously have a balanced and fair reporting across all content. That's how they drive their product. A newspaper to me is a product. It's not, you as a non-media agent will pick it up and it's a newspaper. It's what I read every day for leisure, or I get my news and maybe you listen to radio, whatever. For me, it's a product. And for us to have a sustainable product, we need to cater to everybody. And by everybody, who's the majority of people right now in the places of BEE positions or BEE corporates and that sort of thing. So essentially all it comes down to is agenda. So like the Sunday Tribune or the Daily Newses or of the world and the Mercuries will try and actually cater, like Mercury is a very corporate company, the audience is more corporate and business-like. They would want black corporate people because they know in a place of power right now all over the country, because of BEE, there are far more black senior management than the minority of whoever else. And in that way, obviously that I can see how you would be on the receiving end of the dilemma issue. But obviously, if you do have a very newsworthy angle, I keep going back to newsworthy, is like, that's the quickest, fastest, most successful way to get your stuff published. However, having said that, if you expand your database, as I was explaining to you, one door shuts in your face doesn't mean the like 50 other media agencies out there have the same driven content or the same driven agenda. If I wanted to talk about Indian-related issues, I go to the Herald part of the Sunday Tribune. I don't just pitch everything to my news editor at the Tribune. If I'm doing sport, I've got my own column in sport, and then obviously I do sport-related things. And again, the agenda is women in sport with a emphasis on black women in sport. But I mix it up there. So then again, if you're approaching if you have a sports-related story, you're not going to go to a food journalist or a food blogger. You have to know and target the right people. You have to also long-term establish a good rapport or relationship where you know that you can have that extra phone call that says, hey, listen, Claire, I'm sorry, I did receive your information, but it's really, the resolution of the picture can't be used, there's not enough information. Also, I just need a quotation which wasn't included in your press release, which should be obviously up front. So that's why I accord people that additional courtesy, because I have good relationships with people. And even if it's a brand new person, I establish myself in that way, so you know that you're dealing with somebody solid. If you don't have rapport, if you don't have a database, people just chuck your stuff in the bin. So targeting your media is also another successful way. Okay, we spoke about damage control, and we talked about, applying well-formed media strategies to achieve maximum campaign success. Now that I know that I need a press release, now that I know what the press release should entail, now that I have a database, how do I go about actually collating everything? Well, essentially what you want to be doing is understanding, if you are a PR agent, or even if you're not a PR agent, what do PR agents do? They write press releases, they do interviews, they get things put onto TV shows, they attend press conferences and get media attention there, they do photo releases. They also have PR events or public relations events, and all public relations is promoting a brand, promoting something. And if you can learn how to do these tools, it's simple. You don't need all of this jargon, you just literally need to know how to do a press release, how to do a photo release, and then basically you don't even need the articles, but you do need not an interview, but a quotation from somebody who represents your brand. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Great. Okay, so what is a press release? Basically, it's a very simple one-page document, and it's specific info intended for media agencies. It's when I say formatted, I mean that it's strictly got those general rules of who, what, when, where, how in the introduction, and then in the body it will just tell you a little bit more about the event, then it will add quotations. So I'm not going to phone you and phone 10 people to get a quotation about PSA. Send me a press release, tell me the event, give me the quote, give me who's your spokesperson, so that I may just get clarity should clarity be needed. And then literally all you're doing is you're taking one page, and I've left my business cards on the table. If you'd like to receive an electronic copy, I've just made a few copies today on basically how to write a press release. Okay? It's a pleasure. Okay. So there's some general rules about press release writing, and I will email those copies out. And here's a sample of what a press release, a professional one, should look like. I think we may have an extra few copies, so you might not have to share these. Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. Oh, I've got extra copies of these ones, so it's fine. You may pass that on. Okay, so when we talk about, if you don't mind me just referencing this, this particular document has been provided by a very good friend of mine. She's in Botswana, but she does PR for different countries in South Africa. And how does she do that? Well, basically, her speciality is press release writing. And there's various key points that have been obviously outlined in this document. They talk about isolating key points. They talk about headlines, subheadings, basically finishing off, offensive word choices, and that's what we're talking about, a structured formatted document. Okay, avoiding buzzwords, fonts and spaces, using fonts that are clear, that are easy, writing with passion, with enthusiasm about your company, but also not writing with too much fluff. Okay, obviously, have I missed anything? No. Cool. So basically, I'm not going to read chapters or paragraphs of this document. It's self-explanatory. It's just a basic guideline on how to write it. But that's what we mean by formatted in a specific way to encourage media attention. And if you look at the other example, which is this one, it's called media release. This is just a dummy example of how a press release should look. Okay, you see the logo at the top, and then you see it has title, venue, date, and embargo. Then it's got, she's obviously separated it with a solid line, just to ensure that you immediately catches the eye to say, look, this is the topic, this is what it's actually about. And then the very first paragraph will tell you, listen, it's Johannesburg, it's the Solar World Conference, it's going to be held in Sandton, there'll be approximately 700 delegates from 70 countries, and it's about renewable energy. Immediately, she's covered who, what, when, where, how, and why. And as a journalist, if I don't get those five or six markers immediately in that first paragraph, and if it doesn't suffice to my need of newsworthy, then, okay? So you want to really look for that angle and make sure that also at the end of it, always either end off by saying ends, so we know that it's ended there, and obviously provide a phone number or a contact person, a liaison, spokesperson, or the person who is qualified or allowed to comment on behalf of your organization. Now, if you actually get a quote from a dummy or somebody who doesn't know about the subject that you're trying to get promoted, that person is going to talk rubbish to the media, and that rubbish is going to get propelled. Okay, so you want to also have very strategic quotations in your press release. If it's clean, if it's and clear, you will create or propel that brand in a healthy way, like we started off saying. And if it's not clear, and if the person doesn't know what they're saying, and if I phone that person up, not just me, any other journalist phones the person and says, okay, I need further comment. I see we've quoted you, you're the go-to person. Can you also comment on it? And they're like, no, I don't know, and umming and ahhing, either the story goes in the bin or the journalist will find a new, more delicious story to write about, if you know what I mean. Okay? So we also talk about containing information about the particular person, company, event, area, or newsworthy interest. It's relevant to a publication and public. So you, like I said, you wouldn't send sports stuff to the food journalist, and you wouldn't send food stuff to the sports journalist because they don't correlate. You want to be targeted. But generally, it's email to media agents with contact details, the media liaison communication officer's details, but most imperatively, it's time-sensitive document. Okay, if it's a time-sensitive document, you're not going to send me something that happened last month and say that it's relevant now. You're going to rather send something to me at least a week before it actually happens and says that gives me a chance to present it at my agenda-setting meeting. I'm going to say to my editor, listen, I've got this press release, there's this event, I've heard that Zuma is coming to PSA, I'd love to go check it out, once it's, and then suddenly I get this email or I get the press release and here's all the details, the venue, the time, the place, etc. And sometimes because it's a high profile person, you can't always put those details in because it has to be very quietly managed. But then what you can do is like a post press release, where if you are restricted by government or your client about having media at a specific place, which is very rare, but in the case of, like we said, the president or somebody important, you can do a post-press release where you take photos from the event, you write up the release and you say, this happened yesterday or this happened earlier today, here are some photos, here's our quotation, etc. And in most cases, if it's newsworthy, the journalist will actually take your entire press release and just publish it like that. Or they will reference most of the points and they will accredit your organization. Okay, so in a nutshell, it should only be a page long. Like I said, the 5 W's and the H. It must have relevant contact references, usable quotations, accompanying photos. When you actually attach a photo, please ensure, and you will learn this as you deal with different journalists, certain media houses have a restriction on attachments. If you have an attachment that exceeds the limitation that the server can handle, your email will get rejected, that journalist doesn't receive the pictures, they miss the deadline, the story gets killed basically. So, excuse me, as a rule, generally you would just send 1 or 2 photos, or even in your press release, you would just say photos on request. And when you do send them, you would send them as an attachment, a high resolution attachment, or you can reduce the resolution or use platforms like Dropbox, or you can send them over various other platforms that you're comfortable in sending, or you know the journalist uses. Don't ever send WhatsApp pictures. Don't WhatsApp your journalist and say, hey, I'm at this function and here's my picture, and I open up and it's a WhatsApp picture, because I will not only delete it, but I'll probably give you a mouthful about WhatsApp. I don't mind receiving WhatsApps, but I cannot use a WhatsApp picture. Okay? WhatsApp compresses. If you also post to social media and then say to a journalist, oh, by the way, if you need some pictures, please go to my Facebook profile and then just open up that particular album, and then all the pictures are there. I'm going to say to you, squash the story, or let us have a conversation about understanding how to deal with media. We need high resolution pictures, 1 or 2 maximum, and also Facebook compresses the resolution so it doesn't show in the paper. It's the only time we will take from social media is if it's a high profile case, we can't have access to information, and then the newspaper are naughty and we're allowed to, because it's a public domain, take whatever we want. And even then, those pictures aren't presented in full-blown color or size like they should be. They're just reduced to ensuring that it doesn't pixelate, if you know what I mean.
I have a whole of high resolution images on my website for journalists to use.
Okay.
Is it acceptable to send them a link and say, picture high resolution at this link? And they just have to click on the link.
Absolutely, absolutely, brilliant point, and kudos to you for actually thinking cleverly and strategically, because remember, if you're putting it in your press release, here's the link here, go download, and if you have specifically marketed it in that way, then what you're doing is you're actually making it easier for me to just go online, click download at my own leisure. Look, it is better if you do send at least one attachment, at least one photo attachment, and when you send that photo, you must caption it. I'm not going to go and dig into, if a story is just on the verge of being newsworthy, okay? If it's newsworthy and I'm using it, I will put 100% effort. And when I say I don't mean just me, I mean every journalist. Against deadlines, we start to sweat and get anxiety, and we've got like 5 or 6 deadlines, and the editor breathing down your throat. And so, it's a very stressful environment. The last thing we need is receiving information where somebody says, oh, here's a WhatsApp picture, or go to my Facebook, or blah, blah, blah. If you're redirecting them by providing the link, it's only a matter of me clicking the link. If in an email, you're sending it to me and saying, well, and that's another thing. You can either send your press release as an attachment, or what most PR people do is they take the body of they actually just paste it into the body of the email, but ensure that at some point it's actually very visible that those photos are accessible on that link. Say click here, or highlight it and say click on this link, or redirect to. And there's a lot of people for big events also use that kind of methodology, and it's very successful. I have had to, especially sports events, when I want pictures, some of the pictures people send me, the person's looking away, or they send that one picture that they should send isn't really usable. And then it's nice that on your link you've got like 6 or 7 or 8 or variety. But remember, when you caption things, captioning is basically, if you've ever opened a newspaper, below it says picture supplied. Or in this case, if you're supplying the picture to the newspaper and you want your name as the photographer, or you want your photographer credited, you'd say caption and then the photographer's name. And then obviously the caption actually means, what is this about? So we'd say President Zuma is a picture of President Zuma at your PSA event, for example. And it would maybe, and be strategic when you take photos. Try and get him photographed with your logo. Because then when that's presented in the photo and published, it's additional media coverage for you. Not just a small caption saying President Zuma attended the PSA thing, etc., etc. I had just this weekend a company that it was newsworthy, so I didn't, it was a very newsworthy event, but I was trying not to have a conflict of interest in terms of the company that I know personally. So because it's newsworthy, I discussed with my editor first, and what I did was I approached the company in saying to them, look, I'll do the interview, and I'll do it because it's newsworthy, but I can't do it as a favor. But what I will accept is if you have a photo of the guy either wearing your branded cap, your shirt, or whatever, they actually gave him a car, and he's standing behind a car, and the entire logo of that company is, hey, editor, I can't help it. The guy sent me a picture of, the logo and things. And that's how you get it. That's just a little trick, a few tricks you can learn on publishing. Okay, I think the rest of it is quite self-explanatory because we've already covered it. Okay, cost of press releases. If you had to engage professional services from a writer, you can pay up to 3 Rand per word, 600 per hour, or 3,000 Rand per press release. And that's because they obviously have to look into not just writing of the press release. In order to write, you need to disseminate the information first. Where is it happening? How is it happening? And all the other things linked to the who, what, when, how, why, etc. As you'll see from this 4-page or 5 or 6-page guideline, there's quite a lot that goes into it if you want to be strategic. So the key elements to achieve is basically learning how to do it yourself can save you all that cost. And the key elements is the database collections, personal contacts, personal relationship with media agents, photographers, journalists, editors, and well-known bloggers. Don't underestimate the power of bloggers if you can't get into mainstream media, because if you have people blogging about you, if you invite a few bloggers to come and talk about PSA, the fact is they're creating online content. And whenever somebody Google searches PSASA, immediately it redirects or shows you other platforms where you have been mentioned. And that in itself is also a form of PR for your company. And then again, you're also controlling the content on the internet. It's not just what somebody wrote about you. You invited the blogger, and you set the agenda, and you know what to expect when you open up that article. Okay, cool. So I have given you a handout. I've actually given you 2, which we've gone into. And just to quickly get into journalism, and the reason I put it last, the PR most important, is that, as I summarized in the beginning, journalism basically is communicating between the public and the government and public. There's various forms of journalism. I'm not going to get into the definition too much. And obviously, we have freedom of expression, etc., but we also have a whole lot of guidelines. Okay, what is journalism? It's the activity of communicating information or specific information and newsworthy information. It's gathering, presenting news, reporting breaking news, investigating, exposing crime and corruption. So if my entire day is based on exposing crime and corruption and hard news and data collection and dissemination, the last thing I need to hear about is somebody's cat stuck in a tree, some CEO's birthday. Because firstly, newspapers are reducing because of the economy, because everything is becoming more online. Whatever limited information or whatever limited pages we do have to print on, editors and media houses are being very specific about the agenda and content. So if you know that I'm a crime reporter and you feel strongly that your business area or where you host your business is being affected by crime, then maybe approach a crime journalist and as an angle say, listen, we've actually experienced quite a high crime rate in our area. Our offices are always getting burgled. The police in this area don't seem to do anything. And the news angle immediately to me is lack of consideration from police, lack of action from police, lack of this, lack of that, you know what I mean? And then I would find that would be the newsworthy angle. And that way you get your name in the paper, but I get a story out of it. Okay, tools and methods. Obviously we do use computers and telephone and email and etc., etc. This is the most important thing though. This is the process that we go through, the news process. Talking about from idea, from week to week, when I get into a newspaper, I don't particularly go into an agenda setting meeting because I've got a column and I can write whatever I want every week. But when you are doing hard news, soft news, feature pieces, and most probably your things fall under feature, where it's a one-on-one interview or it's specifically about your event, etc. In an agenda setting meeting, I would sit with like 5 or 6 or 8 other journalists, and I would sit with the editor and the sub-editor and the news editor and a whole bunch of seniors, and then I'll pitch my idea, we'll discuss that, we'll talk about who can be interviewed, who's got contacts at that table to be able to fulfill the story needs and resources, and then eventually, if it is approved, because you can send me a press release and I can pitch it to my editor, and if he doesn't like it, he's going to say no. But, excuse me, if he does say yes, then obviously there's a follow-up and the story actually happens. For us, the golden rule, it's what we call the inverted pyramid. It's literally if I had to take this page and make a funnel out of it. So you know that the idea of a funnel is that it's usually wider at the top and smaller at the bottom because you're sifting stuff. And anything that can't get through shouldn't get through. In terms of news media, what we do is our 5 W's and our H. We sift through all the information and try to get only the best, most important, because the psychology of a reader is They read all the important stuff first, and then halfway through they like just flip the page to go to the next story. Okay, so you want to grab the reader. And if you write as well as me, then they read your whole story. Okay, cool. So just having understood that, now you also understand why your press release has to be catchy, short, sweet, and to the point. Okay, so basically again, the who, what, when, how, why, and I like this one because it specifically, or just summarizes, it says that the most important thing would be your critical information, followed by a little bit of importance regarding the event or whatever it is you're talking about, and then finally just reducing it down to the fluffy bits like the quotes from, oh, we're the greatest ever for whatever we do. And that can actually, this particular model can also be used in creating a press release. It can be used in creating documents that you want to send that's not a press release but geared toward media agents. Okay, genres, the different genres of news. There's hard news, soft news, features. There's a few definitions of basically what these entail. So if you understand the different definitions, you'd know where your story would fit in and how to approach a media agent. Like the thing about Zuma. When the subject is got to do with a prominent or a famous person, because being prominent and being famous are two different things, when it has to do with a prominent famous person, then immediately becomes newsworthy as sort of a semi-hard news, because it's the president and we all want to know what the president is doing because we're not so good with economics at the moment, or economically. Soft
crime.
News, sorry?
And it's crime.
Well, if he's attending, but that's another thing, is if he's just attending your seminar on how to be a better speaker, 304,058, whatever.
Don't you think the speechwriter is actually the one who let him down? The speechwriter should be at training.
Yes
In training.
and no. Because I used to, when I began in industry, I used to write speeches for the premier of KZN. And some of the speeches I wrote that he said in front of conferences got standing ovations. And it encompassed, because I have a journalism background, I used a pyramid, I filtered all the information, the most important things, but then I also put heart into it. So over and above all of this, quantifying all the statistics about the different rural areas that he visited and all of the dynamics of what they need to actually deal with on a daily basis from government, what progress they've made and how they intend to tackle. And not just the bullshit fluff stuff, excuse the language, but it was literally looking at what difference can they make and making people feel important. Listen, yes, we understand there's an existing problem, but the guy that was reading my stuff, he was a good speaker. It didn't even matter what I wrote, he was a very good speaker. And I was just a good writer. But the point I make is, unfortunately, it said that our president doesn't have more than a standard 1 education? Standard 2 education. With that level of education, I don't think, yes, for one, he shouldn't be using really, really, really big words, but in his position of power, it's imperative that he uses those big words. It's unavoidable.
But the speechwriter, I honestly believe that the speechwriter should have written the number in words and not in digits, knowing that this oak can't read.
On that specific point, yes. And then it was also raised in media that recently they've started changing the way they do his notes. They made the font really big, and they put line spacing. And also what they've started doing is spreading it across 2 or 3 pages, so that, as he finishes and he starts the next 3 or whatever, they've completely changed the methodology on how to allow him to say that information, knowing that he can't pronounce the words, knowing that he's incapable of defining the content properly. So, but in terms of the relevance for us here, sorry, I can tell you 600,020,500 times about how many different ways they could be better in dealing with him, but at the end of the day, if the speaker's not good, this is a speaking organization, you would know. Sometimes you just can't win. But having said that, let us move on. Sports features, investigative news, if you know where your information lies in terms of your press release, you'll know exactly which journalist to go approach. If you have a daughter or son who's doing very well in athletics, and you know that the Sunday Tribune covers the agenda of female athletics from week to week, then you would approach me and you'd say, hey, listen, I know this 20-year-old, she's doing really well, she's got a colors, KZN colors, she's doing well at nationals right now, would you be interested? And I'll be like, yes, I'm interested, give me the number and I'll do the story. Immediately there's that correlation between newsworthy and It's my job to cover it, and you have the content. And it's basically becomes symbiotic. Okay? And that same principle applies to all other genres of news. Is there any other questions on that? No? Okay, cool. So what is its relevance to PR? Journalists operate on multiple deadlines each week. We have editorial agendas. We have our own instructions regarding content. And obviously, in terms of that diagram I showed you earlier, how in an agenda setting meeting, how I've got to approach the news editor and senior journalist and pitch the story and hope nobody pulls it apart. And then if finally it's sort of approved, then I can get into using all the resources we have and energy into putting it together. So at first, obviously, that story goes to the senior reporter or directly to the news editor, and then it gets, once the story is actually written, it has to be edited and overlooked and seen and checked by like 6 people before it actually gets to the newspaper. And it becomes such an arduous process that honestly, this is why journalists don't even bother from the very beginning. If your stuff is like borderline newsworthy, why would I waste resources when we're on limitations currently? And lastly, if it finally does get approved at agenda settings, when it comes out, it's not even going to get published because my editor's going to say you're missing quotations, you don't have this, you don't have that. And it's not me, the journalist. It could be that I found PSA and I said, well, your spokesperson was like, I didn't know, and then my editor's like, this is rubbish, please chuck it. And then I get pissed off and never want to do business with you again. Okay, go. So reporting is a serious business. What deters media interest? Perhaps the most important thing to understand. If anything, I'd like you to take away today this page. Basically, press releases that have no newsworthy content, press releases that are glorified adverts. Like if you want advertising, go pay for an advert. But if your stuff is newsworthy and you need a story done on it, then by all means send me a press release with some pictures. A lack of understanding of what a PR agent does and the difference between a paid advert and newsworthy content. Okay? Basic press releases that have so much information, it's not summarized, there's spelling mistakes, it just becomes too much effort to disseminate. Again, it would deter me from even considering it. And releases that require an unreasonable amount of media inquiries or resources, amongst all the other things. Okay, so most importantly, don't bombard and stalk journalists. If you put like 5 times a day you're sending me, PR agents do this. They're so hard up to get money for paid ad, or like obviously they get paid when they interact with us and get stuff published, that they will send us like a press release from you and you and you and you and you, and they don't even care if it's newsworthy. It's just like, I got paid to send out a press release. That's my standard fee. I've done my job. Thank you. Goodbye. And then what does the general journalist do?
Chuck it.
We don't just chuck it. We actually block your email address.
Set up an email rule.
Yes, or we redirect straight to the bin. So I don't even take the effort of dragging and clicking and putting. I just redirect to a folder that's the bin, or into a folder that's junk, or whatever. In case I just need to reference it for that week, it redirects and just stays there for a couple of days, and then bang, cleaned out. Okay, so don't do that. Don't have, and you should. If you hire a PR person, check with them. How many different press releases have they sent leading up to it? How many different agencies did they send it to, etc., etc. Get your money's worth. Don't just let people take your money and...
But haven't you just made the point that it's not how many they've sent? It's
how many
have been
agencies
acted
have they
on.
approached? So maybe they sent it to me, and it's relevant to me because I do sports writing or I do a bunch of other things. But have they sent it to a community paper? Have they gotten it into like Caxton? Have they got into Independent? Different media agencies may have sub-publications, and your content may be relevant to those sub-publications, especially if you, like in your industry, are looking for people in the lower living standard measure who haven't bought a house yet but want to buy a house. So then you want to go with, you're not going to go with Mercury and Pray Mercury, because those are businessmen who probably own like 6 or 7 properties. But I'm just saying, and it doesn't negate those publications, you just want to target people that don't have and look at your audience. Have I answered that? Any other questions? Cool. This is what a normal database, when it's sent out into an email. Now the problem is, if you ever send an email and you want to like approach a bunch of journalists, BCC them. Someone CC'd me, and I've always used this in my presentation, I now own the entire database of I have these people's stuff anyway. I used to work for Alan Dunn, and I also have my own internal email with the company which I access anywhere in the world. Because when I travel, I still do work for them, obviously. And I do have most of these. But there are some people, like look at this one. This one's editor at screenafrica.com. All I have to do is go type in screenafrica.com and find out what publication they are, what type of stuff they cover, and would my things be relevant. But the point I'm making is, if your database is the most important thing for good publicity, that idiot's just given it away. And then I'm going to be an idiot and give it away to all of you. Okay? But yeah, that's actually got the most important media agents all over Durban, KZN, and South Africa. This is a complete comprehensive thing. So, yes.
May I ask a question around ethics and integrity? I am constantly sent stuff in not BCC, whatever. I have these long lists, but I choose not to download those names and add it to my database because I don't believe it's ethical to do that.
I think yours is not just a problem of ethics, it's a matter of constitution. The new constitutional law as of 7 or 8 years ago says that if you don't create your own database based on information from people you've met and who have given you permission to use it, on your website, if you distribute newsletters, the current fine is 100,000 per infringement. So if I were you, it wouldn't be a matter of ethics, it would be a matter of bank balance. Can you afford to pay 100,000 for every infringement? There are unethical companies that sell databases, and if you are paying somebody to do your newsletter distribution, find out from them where are they getting the databases. If you've not provided one and they've offered that as a service, use us, we'll give the database distribution. No, where did you get it from? Because it's your branding. If you don't have the unsubscribe button, you get into trouble. If you're using a database that is not relevant to you and your market specifically that you've created, you get into trouble. If you get into trouble, it's 100,000 Rand. What I'm trying to make a point here about is how somebody didn't BCC, they just CC'd, and they firstly let the entire database go. Secondly, they exposed a whole lot of email addresses. And if you ever did want to, my final point on the matter is, if you ever did want to send a press release, when you do finally email people, you want to have like that many names going out, but specifically of people that you know, not just spamming them. So look, you can do 5, 10, 15 emails, as long as it's targeted, and if you're happy to do that and they're happy to receive it, then by all means. But this one also says Media 24, Mercury News. If it's a general story or general press release, you can send it to everybody. Any other questions? Okay, sorry. Yes, addressing a journalist and building a database. In media context, I think we have covered everything. When a story is time sensitive or urgent, yes, you may call the journalist or want to address them or pitch your story. So you've got 2 days to put something together and you decide, listen, okay, fine, I'm going to call Sheetal and say, listen, how can I do this? Obviously, the essential thing to do is just send the press release and the attachment, but if you don't have one on hand and you just want to find out, can you get this? Phone in advance, don't try and avoid things that are in the last 2 days, okay, because again, that reduces your chances. But if it's really urgent, give the person a call if you have that rapport. And that's why we said building relationships are important, because you want that person to accept your phone call and to help you, and then not feel bad about accepting your phone call the next time with identity call. I don't turn people's phone calls away. Even those stupid marketing people, I answer every call. It's terrible. Okay, do not send large files. Respect your recipient's wishes if they do not want to receive information from you continuously. Newsletter format and distribution must include an unsubscribe button. Send 1 or 2 pictures. Use high resolution. And then obviously add your presser in the body of the attachment as opposed to just the attachment, file attachment in an email. I think that just, if I've right on time there.
Remarkable.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, I wanted to keep it short and sweet, but I realized that if I failed with short and sweet, you'd get tall and gorgeous, and that would be fine. But thank you so much. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, great. Well, please do feel free to check out my website, or if you'd like, send me an email, and I will send you an electronic copy of the press release document that I put in front of you, both the example as well as the guideline on how to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.